you going off the road?
I am.
You are. We're off-roading, which is not what we're supposed to be doing, but it's fine.
This is the Arctic Circle Road, and when complete, it'll be the very first road connecting 2 towns in all of Greenland. That's pretty crazy, right? Yeah, I know. It makes you wonder, how do locals commute around the world's largest island? Hi, I'm Kamari, your modern-day Nordic explorer, and this was not only my first time ice camping back in 2019, it was also my first time camping ever. I think I've never done it before. And this was my assigned roommate, Lynn, who thankfully knew exactly what to do. But she had to tolerate my very overzealous self. Poor Lynn.
My partner, Lynn, Danny's pulling everything, so I can be back here doing photos and videos.
Welcome to our humble abode. First, we hiked across the ice sheet to our urban campsite and set up our personal tent. Thank you, Lynn.
Let's see the look, because she knows what she's doing.
And then the community one. We ate several of those dried meals, which actually weren't that bad, and had 2 days of glorious exploring on the ice sheet. Now, I did a lot of other really cool things on that trip, including almost dying from being hit by an iceberg.
Broke open, so we had to move quickly. You can see it rotating still.
But this was the highlight of my trip, and arguably a top moment in life. The happiness.
I'm feeling the poop.
Yes, I was really happy carting our poop back. The peace, the beauty, the adventure. It was like I was a polar explorer, which I'm pretty sure I was in another life. I got a chance to explore this, no pun intended, in an upcoming video when I was in Svalbard.
So you're probably wondering, what does it have to do with transportation? Well, everything. And you're probably wondering why I'm at an airport. Yeah, I'm gonna watch the last video for it to make sense.
So getting to the starting point of our ice camp experience, they announced in the tour bus,
We are currently on in Greenland.
the ice sheet road at a whopping 35 kilometers. Sure, most of my trip's itinerary included planes and some boats booked by a travel agent, since I was visiting different parts of the island, and I knew the country was largely covered by the Greenland ice sheet, approximately 80% in fact. But I would later learn that Greenland's road network was relatively non-existent. So for the next week and a half, I experienced a taste of what it was like to commute around the country, and also experienced living the plague, mosquitoes. It's a real problem in the summer, so consider yourself warned.
There's so many mosquitoes. I couldn't even handle the spray. I'm putting the net on, and I literally can't see anything. Like, I mean, I can see, like, figurines of things, but, like, can't really sit and see stuff.
But it got me curious. What was Greenland's full transportation network look like? Specifically, how did the locals, the 56,000 of them spread across the world's largest island, how did they get around? And with the rise in tourism, was there any upcoming projects that was going to make the country more accessible for all?
Tourism to the Nordics has exploded the past decade, thanks to the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull. Icelandic's hard, y'all. In 2010, that drove people in masses to Iceland. And even the more recent one, Again, Icelandic is very difficult. I am working on it. Like I said, these eruptions have brought people in droves to Iceland. Heck, I was one of them, and it's part of the reason why I created this channel. And it's also the reason why I named a cat, the real one with my parents in Seattle, and the stand-in one who joins me on my adventures, Floki. He's named after the first person who intentionally sailed to Iceland. He's supposed to help get me there, but honestly, he's been failing his job since day one. But in more recent years, we're starting to see those northern explorations extend to Svalbard and Greenland, as is my love too, making these 3 countries, or territories, my favorite in the world.
But there's an assumption that all Nordic countries and territories are the same. But they aren't. They couldn't be more different, especially when you talk about transportation and mobility around each of the islands.
Iceland has a ring road, which gives you full access to the island on your terms. Now, I've driven about a dozen times, and I have personally seen vast improvements over the years, in part due to increased tourism, which we'll talk about in a later video. Svalbard has polar bears, which is great, but it does limit your mobility almost entirely as a tourist, as you always have to travel with a polar safety guide, like Martin, who you'll later meet in my Polar Expeditions video.
He's like, as long as you're in shooting distance for a polar bear, you're okay to wander. Because he's like, I need to be able to see you and save your life. Welcome to the Arctic, guys.
And then due to the climate and the ice sheet, which can be up to 3 kilometers thick, Greenland has no roads connecting towns and settlements, causing locals, tourists, and goods to travel by everything but road. Let's meet Laust. He lives between Geirløkshvak and Sisimiut. Though he'll admit it's really rare for somebody to live between 2 places.
Go by airplane sometimes 2 times a month between the places. A few times I go by dog sledge, but it's a 25 minutes plane, and it's a 3 days trip with dog sledge. So it's not something you do every week.
How cool is that? He travels by dog sled. Oh, I'm so jealous. Floki really needs to up his A game.
It's very expensive to travel around Greenland.
And he's right about that. So I crunched some numbers while I'm here. I'm kidding, I did it beforehand. And here's what I found. An average round-trip flight between the two cities can range anywhere from 200 to 350 euros, depending on the season, which is comparable for me to fly to Austria, where I used to live, to Iceland. But the distance between the two is only 170 kilometers, which is roughly like an hour and a half, maybe a 2-hour drive. And that's exactly both the challenge and opportunity with commuting in Greenland as a local and as a tourist. It's like a road network makes the rest of the modes time-intensive and expensive. A project that Laos is leading will not only create the new longest road in the country at 170 kilometers, but will also be the very first road in the country connecting two towns, the two he happens to live between, creating more access for all. But more about that later on. So back to the first question I asked, what does the full network look like? Now, I'm going to give you a comprehensive overview, so get your popcorn or whatever else you have when you're watching a YouTube video, but keep it clean and G-rated, please, and we're going to get started. Historically, the two major modes of transportation have been built on the coast in the summer and dog sleds in the winter. So during the course of actually putting together this video, I was actually invited back to Greenland to cover the Arctic Circle Road, which is that project I've been mentioning. We'll get to in a minute, but I actually had a chance to experience the dogs for myself. Dog sledding was the only means of transportation until
19th century.
Dog sledding has been a tradition, especially in the area north of the Arctic Circle, as well as East Greenland. These areas are commonly referred to as dog sled districts. And at one point, it was the only means of transportation across the sea and frozen fjords for fishing and hunting seal, and across land to hunt muskox.
The survival in Greenland, it's because of the dog.
But this didn't happen overnight, and is linked to the migration of cultures to North America, where the first to arrive was the Sakhwa culture.
Had dogs, but they didn't know how to use the dog. So they didn't have the sled, they only had the dog.
But the next culture, the Dorset, created the sled. And the last culture, the one that all Greenlanders are descendants from, the Thule, put it together.
They learned how to use the dog.
And like what William said,
they depended on the dog.
Many of the dog owners use it for transporting fish from the fishing place to the town. In North Greenland, they use them for hunting and raise them to corner the prey.
They aren't particularly helpful in hunting areas where you're only able to access via dog sleds. But I don't see Floki being able to corner anything unless it's a pile of treats.
In the beginning of 90s here in Commute, municipality decided to move the dogs outside of town. So many of the owners thinks outside of city doesn't match with their lifestyle, having all own.
Snowmobile comes, and it is much easier to own a snowmobile than dogs.
Yeah, so I heard it's actually cheaper to own a snowmobile. Yeah. But Sisimiut has seen a rise in dog sled ownership compared to the rest of the country.
And more youth are beginning to have an interest in dogs again.
So they want to own their own dogs, essentially. That's very cool. Now, most people I met in town actually own sled dogs for personal use and would often go out with them on the weekends. And sometimes they would even rent them out to William and Nini if they're ever short for tours. But I was curious, did people ever take sled dogs into their homes?
It was too much work with him at home and with the dogs around here. So it's...
And he has so much energy.
But it didn't last too long because they eventually brought the dog to Sled Town. Now, they weren't the first to try, nor would they be the last, because they actually ran into this the night before.
Jens Ove.
Jens Ove.
Yeah.
Jens Ove. Nick got that right. Oh, he wants to come in now. Is he not allowed in the house? No, not allowed in the house?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. That's sad. He's so pretty, though. We're looking for Jens Ove. Oh, he's here. Okay, we found him. You let him loose so we can come hang out with him. You're huge now. Do you remember me? Probably not. Probably not. You might be YouTube famous, though. You may get some friends. Yeah. Hi. Today, there are about 13,000 sled dogs, which is about half of what it was 20 years ago. So it's not the main source of transportation for most anymore. And for tourists, you can dog sled, but for you, it's probably going to be an excursion versus a way of commuting, unless you have some friends. We're trying to find those friends because I would love to dog sled to like Kangaroo. That's the goal for this trip. Snowmobiles have come to replace dog sledding as a way of getting around in the winter. And in 2023, around 3,000 vehicles are registered in total, which is roughly 5% of the population. And most are actually right here in Sisimiut. It's not too surprising though, because this is the backcountry of Greenland, so locals do use them to venture into the mountains on the weekends and drive around the city. Case in point, this was me the other day getting left home for a friend. However, for a tourist, it's the same as dog sledding. It is more of an excursion or tour than it means transportation, unless you have a friend. So it's time to Sisimiut for now and carry on to your next destination via boat. From April to January, there's a passenger ship called Safra E2 that connects 10 to 12 towns on the west coast of the country, depending on the season. So for some of the smaller settlements, this is actually their only connection to the rest of this country, which is why mostly locals use this. However, tourists can too, which is why we're here. And I'm very excited. In all seriousness, it's like poke out my eye. I've been wanting to do this trip for a while, so I'm really happy to do it. And it's more affordable than flying, and it actually allows you to see maybe other parts of the country that you might not see otherwise. So if you're a solo traveler like me, you're going to pay about 230 to 2,700 euros round trip. And again, it really depends on the route you're taking in the season. Also, what's your bed setup? So your option of having a private cabin for one, or if you're cheap and fucking like me, you can get what we're going to call an open dorm. So why don't we get inside where it's a little bit warmer and check it out? When I checked in, I was given my bed assignment, and thankfully I was on the same level as we loaded onto because heavy baggage problems. They gave me an IKEA sheet and pillow, which are included in the cost, but it was extra for the blanket, which I'd recommend getting. But if you're in one of those fancy cabins, all these things are included, including a private bathroom. But don't worry, there are plenty of toilets and showers located on every floor for all guests. So since it's a passenger ferry, most of the stops are pretty functional, like 15 minutes. However, there are a couple that have longer layover, we'll call. So for instance, Nuuk, you'll have about a 13-hour layover to do a little sightseeing, which I may do next time. And I actually did on my return trip this year when I took her from Sisimiut to Nuuk. But more about why I'm back in the country later on. If I can survive this. This is like real. Like I wasn't even sick on the ferry to the Arctic. It was actually pretty smooth. It was a little rocky, but mostly smooth. This, like literally, I'm bouncing, we're doing that number. So we'll see. Let's continue on. So it takes about 3 days to travel from one end of the route to the other. So that's taking you from west of Greenland all the way to the south. So most people on here tend to stay on about 2 days. My overnight trip from Sisimiut to Iceland won't be as long, but I'm going to enjoy every second of it. Now, the ship has 5 levels with plenty of space to hang out, have some snacks, catch a movie in their theater or on your phone, or just relax and enjoy the view. I ended up sleeping surprisingly well, but I also slept really great when I was on the expedition vessel in Svalbard, so I think I have a thing for sleeping on boats. Breakfast and all meals are served at Cafe Safra, which isn't that bad. So I'm a vegetarian. Eating in the Nordics is always a thing for me, but they actually had options here, which is nice. And they even secure the chairs because, again, it's really bumpy on the ferry. It was also nice to enjoy a short stop to Aasiaat after breakfast. Even though it was 15 minutes, I definitely want to come back here and explore some more. They have icebergs, lots of them. And I wasn't the only one who appreciated them. I mean, look at that beauty. I'm in love. Can we have a moment? Okay, I'm having a moment. You're welcome to join me if you'd like. So even though we're landing at Ilulissat, we actually transfer on to our next destination. So beyond Safra E2, you actually have 3 other lines that are running even smaller boats too. You called it even smaller settlements, home to just a couple dozen, like in the case of this one that I'm going to put on screen because I don't want to mess up. So this place is actually home to about 50 residents. Of all the providers, Disco Line is actually the largest, and it's kind of running 3 main areas. So you have South, Central, and Disco Bay, which is home to about 90% of the population. In terms of cost, a one-way ticket will cost you anywhere from about 27 It will cost anywhere for, just checking my notes, 27 to 207 euros. Again, it really depends on where you're going. And the shortest route is around 11 kilometers. So 11 kilometers for 27 euros can be a lot, just to maybe go grocery shopping.
There are people go to the other cities by boat, not just for the everyday use, it's more for if they are planning to make a big party.
So that was Orla, and he's from the town that we're putting here on Disco Island. So he actually lives in Nuuk now, but where he's from is home to about 800 residents in the town and about 50 across the entire island. So I'm actually waiting for the Disco Line ferry to go check it out myself because I'm a big fan of little islands off of big islands. Bye-bye, Safra Itu. I'll miss you. I did later forget to say the name of the town. It's Qaqataswaq, and I did a whole little explainer about it. So make sure to check the link in my description. Now back to the story. Thankfully, Orla's family has boats.
Father is a fisherman and hunter. My stepfather is also a fisherman and hunter, so they both have a boat. When I visit them, we go around sailing.
And that's the thing that Laos and Tanny mentioned too.
So having a boat in Greenland is very important to get outside of your town, and both for leisure time, but also for visiting friends and family.
Lots of people have their own boats and they get around and do staycations using their own boats. Lots of people have targas, for example.
I met with Elizabeth, and she was the first mini to confirm what I heard from Orla, Tanny, and Laos before I arrived in the country.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have a boat, so they are using that in the summertime.
Okay.
To visit around Disco.
Okay. And this little snippet I heard from Jesper, the CEO of Arctic Circle Business, might help explain why.
In Greenland, we have so many boats compared to other countries. I think per capita we have more boats than there is in Miami. So it's
really?
there is a lot of boats in Greenland, and it's because we love that freedom, being able to just go out in nature and be out there and go with boats from one place to another.
So while I wasn't able to find a stat that indicated, I would say, personal usage of boats, I was able to uncover that you had about 300 large boats and about 2,000 dinghies registered for fishing in 2020. Now, the context of the articles, plus talking to Orla, and frankly, a lot of people since I've been here, it is my very educated guess that there's a lot of personal use attached to these boats as well. And I say that because it is a very similar story that I'm seeing for snowmobiles and dog sleds and even ATVs. A lot of people own dogs, but possibly also rent them out to the local company to be able to use for sledge tourism. And even some people that are getting into tourism because they own sled dogs. Like William and Nini, who fell into their business after getting their first sled dog. The same for Steen and his wife Malene, who now actually have over 20 sled dogs and several snowmobiles to take out tour groups, including me. Same thing for snowmobiles. These are also being used for hunting and maybe fishing too, if I remember correctly. I hope I got that right, as well. Same thing for ATVs. They're also being used to actually transport kind of fish when it's coming off of the boat. These are vehicles that are actually being used for multiple purposes, which could be work-related, it could be personal, and it also could be for tourism. Oh, and you remember the grocery store that Orla was talking about? So it's like right behind me over here. I kind of see his point. It's like they have stuff. It is well stocked, but as a vegetarian, it was like they had things for me, but not enough. So I can see the desire to go to one of the bigger towns on the main island to get what you need. So it's worth noting that the Disco Line also has an Explorer line. So they actually run excursion tours in the Disco Bay area, mostly for tourists. So with my return back to Greenland, they actually were very kind enough to give me a couple excursions to get closer to something right behind me. And no, not the screaming kids, something else. The Kangar Ice Fiord is one of my favorite parts of Greenland. It's also one of 3 UNESCO sites in the country. Now, since boats are much, much smaller than the Safra E2, 238 versus 12 passengers, it allows you to get really close to the icebergs and against the glacial front of the fjord. And fun fact, this is actually the most productive glacier in the Northern Hemisphere, and she sure is beauty. Very tasty. You did very well.
Huh?
You did very well.
Oh, you think?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you see yourself?
I can.
I also completed a whole explainer about the tour as well as the ice fjord. So again, check the link in my description.
I'm gonna put the shades on because the midnight sun. Not quite midnight, it's like 9:30 p.m. Of course. So beyond Disco Line and of course personal boats, you also have 3 other smaller lines that are running the west and south coast. So again, let's go hierarchy for a reminder. Stop for E2 is running to the bigger towns and some of the settlements. Then you're gonna have Disco Line running to usually the smaller settlements. And now we have 3 additional lines running to the even smaller settlements, going as small as about 20.
But the boat network is vital to create access for locals to reach the smaller settlements, especially after the ride.
It's not one of those. It's one of these. God damn it. Damn mosquitoes. I'm telling you, mosquito season here is rough. And they don't talk about it in videos. I should do a whole video about the 10th plague. 9th plague, 8th plague. Back to the story. Flying is your last mode of transportation. However, it's a little bit complicated. It's so complicated. I have to jump into the timeline 1 full year later to give you the update. I flew here just to give this update. That's how committed I am to this story. The reason I'm here, though, will be revealed at the end of the video, so make sure you stay tuned to see why I'm back in the country. This is kind of one of these, I would say, both challenges and opportunities of working on a story that's actually developing in real time. Like, the entire infrastructure in Greenland is rapidly developing, which is very cool to see for somebody like me who's actually spent a lot of time researching and talking to people. Since research, scripting, recording, I've actually reshot this 2 times. This is my 3rd time doing it because, again, things continue to change, but I have to get this video to you. So if this timestamp the information, it is relevant until today, March 28th, 2023.
Actually, October 16th. Because Air Greenland announced more updates again. I really don't lie when I say this all keeps changing. But first, it's important to understand that most of the current airport infrastructure is actually based on previous military installations that supported World War II, which we'll talk about in the next Greenland story. But this creates another challenge. While there are 14 airports, several are far from where most of the population lives, with some in settlements as small as 130 people. So the locations of the airports, plus the weather, have influenced how these route networks have been developed.
Now, so as of today, you have 2 airlines flying into the country, Air Greenland being their national carrier, and they're operating out of Copenhagen because, again, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And I say flying out, meaning if you wanted to fly here, you would actually need to book a trip to Copenhagen first, and then you can carry on too. And you're also having some flights originating out of Iceland too. Now, collectively, those flights are landing in 3 locations in the country.
And of these 3, people are overwhelmingly coming through one of those airports, Kangerlussuaq, especially if you're a local, which I'll explain why a little later on. And it's been a whole journey learning how to say Kangerlussuaq.
Kangerlussuaq. Yeah! Oh, I think I nailed it!
So you have to excuse all my mispronunciations when I was on the ground last year.
Kangerlussuaq Airport, which is right behind me. However, there's no airplanes here, so I feel like I've lost the entire impact of the shot. But it's fine. We're gonna roll with it. I flew to Kangerlussuaq for both of my flights, which is actually the largest airport in Greenland. Now, it's part of a settlement of about 500 people, and it's actually a former military base. So this is, breaking news, we have a helicopter sighting. See, I got you something good, guys. Trust me, that was always planned. Wink, wink. Anyways, like I was saying, this is the only airport that's actually inland where the rest are on the coast. So why is this significant? Well, it's the only airport with the most regularity, making its scheduled flights about 99.8% of the time.
Greenlandic airports wouldn't be able to run without it because they need a backups airport. In case of bad weather in Nuuk or anywhere else, they need to be able to land somewhere not too far away. And Kangerlussuaq is so stable that planes can always land there.
So it basically functions as a stable central hub to receive most passengers into the country. And then once you're inside, you actually transfer to a smaller plane, or maybe a series of planes, or even a helicopter to reach your final destination. And if you're local commuting within the country, well, many of your flights are actually going to pass back through Kangerlussuaq for a short stop. Oh, and you might be subject to a canceled flight. High mosquitoes might be the next great problem in the country. I'm kidding, but it's definitely a thing here.
I feel like the difference between the tourist and the local people is that the local people know that there's a big chance that you're going to be canceled due to weather conditions. The local are more like, oh, well, of course, sometimes that happens. Where the tourist is way more like in a hurry. You can see it in their mood. But sometimes if I meet tourists who are like that, I actually go talk to them and be like, well, this is what happens. And someone should have told you if you go to Greenland. And that's also why I always recommend to please go each place more than 3 days. Because if it's rainy, if it's stormy, like you don't want to go out in that weather. And there's a big chance you're going to get canceled.
I had a series of flights, domestic and international, was canceled. I ended up spending another 3 days here, which I loved. My boss, not so much.
So you're going to want to pad a few extra days, but locals, they already know this. And your second airline flying into the country is Iceland Air, and they land in 4 destinations. But remember, they only get you into the country. You need to use Air Greenland's routes to continue commuting around.
Both airlines were working very closely together to, I would say, streamline an offering to make it easier for customers from, say, North America or Europe to be able to fly into Greenland.
Such as Iceland Air using Keflavik Airport instead of their domestic airport to route people in. And Air Greenland signing interline agreements with SAS and Iceland Air, which basically is opening up a few international destinations in cooperation with their route networks. But these updates are related to tourism. Air Greenland also has the responsibility of supporting the local population and the network in the country. This year, they are reopening the Aalborg flight out of northern Denmark for 2 months, and increasing the flights between the two countries during the peak season, which is important since 17,000 Greenlanders live in Denmark, like my friend, Mikaeli. He's from Ilulissat, but studying Arctic Studies at the University of Copenhagen.
I mostly try to get home like once a year, at least once a year, when it's possible. It's often that I go back twice a year to be with my family in Nunavut. Personally, since I was a child, it has been expensive to travel around in the country.
And when asked if he felt Air Greenland has made strides to support locals,
in my opinion, it has been more by helping tourists to come into the country and make it cheaper for them to travel from A to B to Nunavut. It hasn't really helped the Inuit to get cheaper flights between Qaanaaq to Qaqortoq, as an example, or Qaanaaq, Nuuk, Ilulissat.
But one of their programs, which is geared towards tourists, can also work for locals or regular visitors like me and my friend Naja. She's from Denmark and has worked in tourism with Disco Island the past few seasons. And we actually ran into each other at the Copenhagen airport last year en route back to the country. I was heading to Sisimiut while she was heading back to Disco Island, but not for work, for vacation. And like me, she actually opted for Air Greenland's stopover program at Gangalussuaq, which is a bit similar to the one by Iceland Air, where you get 24 hours in town to enjoy nature, wildlife, and see the Russell Glacier. This is also the same place where I had my ice camp experience on my very first trip. But the thing is, neither of us took the stopover to see the sights.
When I'm going to go to Greenland and I have to pay the whole thing myself because I'm like a tourist going on vacation, I split up my trip actually because that makes it way more cheap. If you go straight from Denmark to wherever you have to go in Greenland, it's going to be really expensive. But if you do the layover in Gangalussuaq, you can have like a night there, and that's going to make your trip cheaper.
And I have done the stopover myself together with my family. Why not? It's cheaper, and so if you can get a place to stay that is cheap enough, it can be worth it.
I personally dropped my ticket in half. And in fact, I've noticed many locals my past 2 trips taking a stopover, passing time in the airport cafe or even the hotel before their connection the following day.
But what I love about doing that too is when you're actually in the airport, you always meet local people. And when you have been in Greenland for a longer time, you always meet somebody you know. Actually, in the beginning, I was way more like, what am I going to do here? Like, this is so boring. It's 24 hours. Go to the airport and you like hang out there just for an hour or so. You will meet people you know, or you will meet people you can talk to.
Now, despite these efforts seemingly more geared towards tourists and easing their connection to the country, I'd later learned there are other forms of support that can help you get around, which we'll talk about in a minute.
It is worth mentioning, though, when I was in Iceland, my friends told me about this third airline called Erneer. They're a small Icelandic airline, and they have a flight out of Akureyri, which is in the north, the second largest town in the country, and it's flying into a small town on the east of Greenland. So that is an option as well. But there's just a lot changing in this space, and will continue to change. And this is just the airlines. Maybe we haven't gotten into some of the other stuff. So we need to head back to the original timeline and learn. For my second trip, I came here to Snowmobiles. Isn't it beautiful? I know I'm in love. It's also the country's second largest town, or Commute, which is the Greenlandic word, with about 5,500 residents. So on my first trip, I actually flew into Nuuk and Ilulissat, both important stops. So Nuuk is the capital, and then Ilulissat has the Ice Fjord, which is a UNESCO site, and the adjoining Disco Bay. If you've seen any iceberg shots from Greenland, most likely it's from there. So both of those airports are actually getting remodeled for 2024. And it's very exciting because it's going to bring about a lot of cool changes. So first, again, you're going to have more movement, right? Because we've got two locations that are able to take on more flights. So more movement for people within the country and entering. We're talking about exporting fresh fish now, which is great because it'll also help the economy. We're also hearing talks of stronger trade relationships with Alaska and Canada. And then the one that I'm most excited about is potentially a third airline carrier with direct flights to Europe and North America. I'm not the only one excited about that too.
Like right now with Greenland, you fly into Kangerlussuaq, which is the main airport in Greenland, and then you would normally switch planes and go on a smaller plane like the Dash 8 to the settlements or towns. In the future, there's going to be two new airports in Nuuk and in Ilulissat, and that is really going to be a game changer because suddenly you'll be able to fly directly into two big hubs for tourism and for business in that sense.
It's strategic, though.
We're definitely looking towards the Faroe Islands as an example of how they have developed and which tactics they use in terms of which airlines came in, do they fly all year round, what taxes, and so on.
Well, she currently lives in Copenhagen. She did live in Greenland for 5 years and is excited about the future of tourism in the country. Orla is too. Well, at least what it means for locals.
So when the new airport is open, we don't have to change flights to go to Denmark because we have to change from Kangerlussuaq to Denmark, fly directly from Nuuk to Copenhagen. That'll be very good for us, or for me.
Now, direct flights will also be game-changing for something else.
It's going to be 30% cheaper to get here when the new airport is done. You're skipping the hub station in Kangerlussuaq.
Well, you can now out of Iceland Air.
Yeah, but now you can land from wherever.
That's true.
But the cost reduction is actually significant from a local perspective, and I'll explain why in a minute.
There are a few other smaller airports, not here in Ilulissat. I just wanted to show you a different view. But you also have 47 heliports around the country, and those are mostly used for private tours, some search and rescue, getting researchers to their research stations, and of course, commuter travel. And for Orla?
Normally 2 stops, Aasiat or Ilulissat, take a boat to Ilulissat. There's only a helicopter on winters.
So while flying is the main mode of transportation around Greenland to get over these beautiful icebergs, can you see them now? Yeah, Ilulissat's got icebergs. It does create another obvious, or maybe not as obvious, challenge.
You only get to one other town if you take a flight. Then if you have friends distributed over the whole of Greenland, then you'll get very poor if you want to visit all of them. But if you fly to the rest of the world, and our main connection is to Copenhagen, then you can visit Copenhagen and you can visit many places in Denmark for much less than if you wanted to fly or take the boat ride around in Greenland. Many people have friends and family in Denmark. Often they choose for that option instead of traveling in their own country.
And this is why locals are largely flying through Kangerlussuaq on Air Greenland.
When I lived in Greenland, of course, flights between the different towns, they are expensive as well. And when you go for a summer holiday, there are many people who just chose to go to Denmark instead and then go onwards and see the rest of the world.
Or unless somebody prefers to travel to Europe via Denmark.
Yeah, I'd rather go to other places because there are new experience, not just the same.
I travel more within Scandinavia because it's easier and it's cheaper, and you get a lot of connections to different destinations, and it's quite easy to travel around.
So I actually was very curious to see this for myself. So I priced out a ticket for this summer, even though it's probably fall when you're watching the video. Sorry guys, editing takes forever. And here's what I found out.
For a 5-day trip to Copenhagen, it was 800 euros. And for a flight during the same window to Lilleset, it was 550 euros. And the soft ride too, it was 620 euros.
So he actually was right. Yeah, double confirm. It did seem to cost just a little bit more to go to Copenhagen. And in theory, you end up getting more value for your dollar if you're going to carry on. I kind of can see the appeal for some to go to Copenhagen instead.
Copenhagen. And we didn't fall.
Now, if you're a tourist, you can probably see how it starts to add up. Your flights into Greenland, but then also going around. But again, you have icebergs. I don't know. I think it's worth it. That's why we're here.
Huge portion of the population don't travel much outside their own town. Actually, I've met people who has lived 20 years in their own town and haven't been outside it and haven't visited other towns in Greenland or outside Greenland because we don't have cheap transportation opportunities.
If I was the one to make up any decisions about that, I would say that it should be cheaper for the local people. There should be a difference from that because they have family all around Greenland. So if they want to go visit family and they don't have a boat, they're probably not going to do it because it's way too expensive.
Travel around Greenland maybe once in 2 years to my hometown to visit my family.
And when asked if he thinks cost stops locals from traveling,
it does.
I would love to go more to Nunavut, my own home country, if it was much cheaper to come here.
Magnus grew up in Nuuk, a municipality housing with his family, and actually development of housing will be our next Greenland story. But their monthly rent was equivalent to 400 euros.
That is actually like less than a flight out of the country. When you think about it, like that should never be more than your rent, a flight. If you're gonna like, let's say, go even within the country, but it is somehow.
And that's the reality for some people. A flight within the country actually costs more than the rent, or maybe their monthly salary. According to Statistics Greenland, the average one makes a monthly income about 2,600 euros before taxes. And a flight to the northernmost airport
can cost as much as just going to Iqaluit in Canada, traveling from south to north within this country.
Now, there is a little bit of government support. If you're a student, they do cover one flight per year for you to go home, which Orla took advantage of.
But the rules aren't quite the same if you're studying in Denmark.
Or the change of legislation, the government will not pay for people like me that are residents in Denmark already. They don't allow me to come back to my home country by paying for their students, even though it has been like that before. If I didn't get help from my family, if I didn't have any income besides my education, I wouldn't have been able to come back to my home country.
Now, access to government funds, especially if one's residency is now in Denmark, is important for 2 reasons.
Studies shows that whenever you are able to go back to your home country more times, or more than once even, it can be a factor that makes people want to go back after education and even completing an education.
And the second is when you consider the differences of these two cultures that are interlinked due to colonization, which we'll discuss more in the next Greenland story.
To build up your own community in Copenhagen, in another culture that probably doesn't understand you, it helps a lot to go back home, to feel comfortable in the community that you come from.
There's also some support if you were in a sports and culture event.
Greenlandic championship in handball and football and skiing and so on, then each family doesn't have to pay for that. That is supported by the municipality and the government.
We have the skateboarding park behind me and then the sports holland over there, so we might have a future star on our hands.
One big change during Corona was that it's called Fair Freight Isa. So it's like this arrangement with the government and most of the big companies in Greenland where people who live there get one free annual flight a year where they can go to the equivalent of where they live to Copenhagen or to Iceland, for example. And that was only used to go outside the country before. But when Corona came, then there were some policies changed so that people could actually fly within Greenland and to experience tourism in Greenland. And you could use it also for accommodation. And they have actually kept this policy, even though Greenland has opened up again, which I think is fantastic.
For someone like Elizabeth, who moved from Denmark over 40 years ago, this program is really her only way back to the country.
People onto me and my work pay so that I can go to them.
Okay. And then you go.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the same for the teacher and many of the people working at the office.
Okay. But what about if your work takes you around the country?
If they want me to come to the cities here, I kind of need to lower my price, the flight, the hotel, food, and they're gonna pay me, so it is very expensive.
Kim, or Kim O'Jax, is a rapper, motivational speaker, and coach. Now, while he's based in Nuuk, his work does take him around the country around 4 to 5 times a year to places like Sisimiut, where we actually met. And we discussed how he often would have to lower his own fees just to offset the high travel costs. And most people that I spoke with, either an interviewee or friend, all comment how much they enjoyed work trips because it allowed them to see parts of the country, well, they might not see otherwise. So let's assume you're not blinded by light and you take ferries and boats to get to your destination. So what's the network like once you're actually a town or settlement? So you actually have 150 kilometers of road network across the entire country where you have, forgot my numbers, guys. I know them. I know my numbers. I studied my script. 40%, 60% gravel, 40% paved. And most of that paved network is actually in Nuuk. So even though most towns in Greenland actually aren't that big, they're probably a few miles from one end to another, it is still helpful to have a car.
Nuuk is, for a capital, it's very small. So the heart of Nuuk is walkable. You can walk to most places. If you live far away, and that would be like a 20-minute bus ride or a 10-15-minute drive by car, like I did in Ringaput. That's as far as ways you can get. You could use public transport, which is like a bus, or you would have a car and drive that way, or cycle.
And for Orly, he actually drives everywhere in town too. And very fun fact.
There are 4 traffic lights in Nuuk.
And those are the only ones across the entire country. It's pretty cool, right? They're very trusting people here in Greenland, and I like it. Now, in some of the bigger towns and settlements, you will find public transportation like buses. You'll also find cars and taxis, which in the case of Sisimiut, a former taxi driver confirmed it's mostly locals using the service there. But one thing that was interesting to discover was in a place like Nuuk, half the cars are registered to businesses, which shouldn't have been surprising because some people I met up with were actually driving a company car. Now, all of this is showing a very similar pattern to what I saw in the rest of the country, where dog sleds, snowmobiles, and ATVs are being used for more than one purpose. Oh, and speaking of ATVs, I learned talking to locals, it's the mode of transportation that's risen the most the past few years. In 2023, 738 ATVs are registered across the entire country, with the lion's share in Sisimiut. Now, this is an overall increase of 131% from 5 years ago. And I think I might contribute by making it 739. Not gonna drive into the snow and get stuck. He let me drive, which was a terrible idea. And now we're stuck. This is fun.
driving on the road so I won't off-road like last time. So as I drove off into the mountains, I'll let you enjoy the rest of the story.
And honestly, because these places are really small, again, you're talking a few miles, I don't think, to me, there would be a huge difference between having a closed vehicle and an open one. I mean, yeah, in winter, of course, but if you have the right gear, like I always say, then you're fine. Have an ATV. These goggles are sexy. Safety first, guys, safety first. So hopefully now you're starting to understand why the Arctic Circle Road is so significant. It's going to be the first road in the entire country that's going to connect Sisimiut, the second largest town in the country, with Kangerlussuaq. So remember how I told you I was invited back to Greenland to experience the road for myself? Well, we're about to get in on this UTV tour. Want to come along? But goggles first, because always safety first. Though these aren't really for safety, right, Laos? Are these for safety?
Oh, else you might get mosquitoes or dust in your eyes.
Yes, it's definitely for safety, because we've talked about this already. The 10th plague is the mosquitoes in Greenland in the summer. So we have to protect ourselves.
That's Malik, and he's the mayor of Karaka Municipality, and he's been a driving force around the road development. Now, the Americans built the current longest road, the Ice Sheet Road. Remember, the one I took to go to the ice camp experience in the 1940s. Now, fast forward 20 years, and they proposed the Arctic Circle Road to the Danish government, but unfortunately, it wasn't approved. Now, after decades of back and forth, the project is now largely led by Malik's municipality.
First question for last, where are we?
We are now 20 kilometers away from Kangerlussuaq.
Okay.
We've been driving the first 15 kilometers made by the Americans, and then 5 kilometers on the new ATV track.
Okay. And how long is it going to be?
Oh, we'll have to continue 120 kilometers more to Sisimiut.
The first 15 kilometers were built many years ago by the Americans to get to the Kellyville Research Station. And since, they've added another 130 kilometers of ATV track.
We are 25 kilometers from Sisimiut, so you cannot drive all the way, but next year.
Next year! It's on record, next year.
In total, it'll be 170 kilometers. It's currently a dirt road, but the hope is to upgrade it to a gravel road.
Iceland
As I mentioned earlier, I was invited back to experience the road, and it changed the entire course of this show and my life. But you have to wait for the season finale to learn that story, which is also where we discuss the road much more in depth.
What we're going to talk about now are just some of the highlights of the road. So the road is actually going to have a lot of benefits to the country.
For both locals and tourists.
It will enable you to have continuous research throughout the year and compete or offer complimentary research to the Arctic region, because obviously Svalbard is probably one of the leaders in the areas, and I think Greenland will be able to have a place at the table. Is that the best way to phrase that, Laos? Oh, you're not near me. Oh, I didn't do that right. You heard me.
That was good.
Seat at the table?
Yeah.
Yeah, accurate? Yeah? Yeah, seat at the table. There's no competition here. We all get along. We just all want to stop climate change. I want to stop climate change, and I would love research to help us do that. Fish. We're going to talk about fish, Laos? Laos is like, what are you talking about? So let's break through the screen again. I shot a whole interview with Laos, and I'm not putting the pieces in about the road because we're here doing it together. So he has to redo his lines, and I'm putting him on the spot. Talking about fish. So benefit of the road is actually exporting fresh fish, which has never happened before. Yeah?
Yeah. No.
And see,
the road is for many possibilities, and one of them is that we are a fishing nation.
Yeah,
so we catch a lot of fish out on the Davy Strait, and we sell them frozen because we don't have any roads to drive them to North America or Europe or Asia.
You can fly them, but the problem is that it's not reliable.
It's
on
very
flights.
unreliable.
And that's part of the problem.
on the coast we have small airports, and it's very unreliable, the weather there. So the idea is to take them inland on this road to the main airport of Sleds and fly them out there to restaurants in New York and in London.
Ooh, look at that. Fancy. I like it. Very important. And I want to learn more about the significance of fishing in this area in the other video. So again, it's a plug to go watch the other one. It also creates more certainty for the transport of people and supplies year-round. And for someone like Laos, who I finally got to meet in person, it gives him new ways to commute home every month. And other locals knew more affordable ways to see family and friends. And finally, tourism. And that's honestly what actually started this whole journey. Having a once-in-a-lifetime experience on the ice cap that maybe somebody watching this video can also do too. What I've discovered in my research and talking to everybody, including us, there's a desire to increase the tourism here, but the right kind. I think you're seeing the interest in this particular region growing. Iceland is obviously the case study for that. And I think a lot of people can agree that the infrastructure isn't in place to take on the capacity that you see in Iceland. Yes, the country is really large, but to make sure that we're kind of being conscious of, as people are coming in, it's distributing weight across the entire country.
So we need to grow Greenland sustainably and also in line with the number of planes that come in, because you can't just fly planes in and then there's nowhere to sleep. So there's a whole lot of factors there. And then hopefully there's also going to be tours. And so we have to work on developing that. And that's what we are focusing on right now.
Now, this is one of the few possibilities to build a road in a country, and it creates an opportunity to go between towns and experience nature. Now, personally, I don't think Greenland will ever be cheap, but this new road, paired with the new airports, it will give locals more affordable ways home or to see the rest of their beautiful country. It will also give tourists a chance to see more and see it more affordably too. And they're working on some new accommodations. I saw some images, which I think I can show to you in the video, so we'll drop those in now. They look beautiful. Sign me up. So I'm hoping that actually one of them will take on a permanent residence, because I'm trying to move here. I am. I decided I'm switching teams from Iceland to Team Greenland now. So if you can save me a spot in the middle of the place, I'd appreciate it.
This is a nice spot.
This is a nice spot. I take this spot. I can't go far from here, actually. This is doable. This is doable. Right out there with that lake, guys. That's my new view. All right. And it's even a heart shape, too. See, come on. It's like my channel, a Nordic heart. Look at that. It's a heart. Please. This is like destiny forming right in front of my eyes.
Community avadaningaannik nunarsuarmingaanniillu amarlanerusunik tikinnaqartalernissa tamatumakingunerussama soornami communitinni yaqersimaarnerusumik assiingitsunallu isoqarnerulernissa tassa nunar kommunerput avadaannik amarlanerusunik tikinnaqartalerpat neriniartarfinnut unnuisarfinnut pisinniarfinnullu allanut pitsaasumik sunniutaqartussaamo aningaasaniik amarlanerusunik kaaviaartitinerulernерисигут soorlu Arctic Circle ingerlanneqaraanga sisimiuni takusaripput nunarsuarmi qatiun sisimiunut tikeraaraangamik illoqarfimmo qanorluannertiisumik eqersimaartiisumillu pilersitilartoq taamaamat arpusernguk pilersinnaaratuut tamanna qulaarutiingilera aamma piffissami sivisunnerusami taanna misigisalissagiput tamatumalu misiginissaanu assoruussuar tilanaarpum.
Oh, the Arctic Circle race? We're going to cover that in another video. It's on my bucket list. But after all these months, it was so great to finally meet the mayor. Beautiful.
His own docks.
So you own docks? Okay.
Yeah, snowmobile.
And a snowmobile.
Yeah, that's why you have to come back.
I have to come back, yes. I'm going to go with your dogs.
Yeah, taking with dogs with the mayor.
Okay.
And visit the cabin.
Okay. That's a deal in April.
So.
Yes.
So.
Deal. We're going to shake on that. We're shaking on it. Got that.
So.
Got that on camera. It's a deal. And Van Gogh?
Bukkelina.
Bukkelina.
Rocky.
Rocky. I can do that one. Yes. That one's easy. Hello. I'll see you soon. I hope you're ready for our trip next April, okay? Yep, I'm looking at you, buddy. Yep. I met your dogs. Did I tell you? We stopped by the cat. He's like, those dogs. I was like, hey, those dogs. Yeah, so we need to go out, and then I'm going to go out with the mayor and Cecilia, and then I'll be like, the whole thing. Yeah.
sled tour. I like it. April 2022. It's coming to you guys. I have it on camera. Actually, I have a camera. He invited me. I was like, I'm coming back for it. And I shook his hand on camera. So the whole world knows. He's guaranteed me a dog sled in April. It's happening. Yeah, I'll be here. You better be here too.
And he was. You'll see the video soon-ish. Remember how I said I wanted to find somebody to take me dog sledding? Well, now I have 2 friends. So I shot an ending, but it's not the one I'm going to use. It was too focused on tourists, when the reason I started this story was for locals. I wanted to understand how they moved around. I saw how timely and costly it was on my first trip, and well, I wondered what this meant for them. I saw how beautiful the country was, and I wondered if I was seeing things they would never see. In some ways, the story confirmed what I suspected. The limitations due to the lack of a road network, traveling less or maybe not at all. It also educated me on things I didn't know. Say the desire of traveling to Denmark instead of a few towns away because it was cheaper, or the government support, or combining different methods to commute within a town. It also showed me possibilities too. Possibilities of traveling in ways that were fun, like the disco line trip out to Gagadoswak, or traveling ways to see more of the country, like the Safari too, and even traveling in new ways I hadn't experienced before, like ATV. But most importantly, it showed me the spirit of the people. Inuit are a group of people who are patient, and they are graceful, and they are resilient. And prior to Denmark's colonization of the country, they were nomadic, which we'll discuss in the next Nunarput story. This means they move with ease when they are commuting around the country. They embrace the adventure to get home or visit a friend. Whether it's one plane or multiple, whether it's a ferry or a snowmobile, they are present. They take in their surroundings with the same awe as me. And they enjoy the journey. And that's the same that I encourage for you if you're visiting too. To embrace the adventure, however you may be getting around. And who knows, maybe the road will be open by then, and you have a new way to commute.
Lots of different ways to experience Greenland, and transportation is part of the experience.
So, I hope you make it to Nunarput, and I hope you fell in love with it, just like I did. And maybe I'll see you around. But I gotta catch my flight though for the next story, because we're heading to Iceland. To kiss.
Oh, not again. Not again. We might have a casualty.